kind of from a mental perspective, that's the way I deal with it. I actually went through an exercise once where I made a spreadsheet and did, here are all the tasks I have to do and how much time every task takes. And I laid that all out, and it was like 80 hours a week, which is not, and obvious. And so that was a good exercise in saying, you know what, I can actually do all these things.
Welcome to Content in the Kitchen, where we gather around the kitchen and chat about content marketing. Each episode of this podcast series features tangible tactics from leading experts in the industry, from CMOs to food bloggers and just about everyone in between. We're going step by step through the recipe of content marketing success. In today's episode, we're diving into the world of solo content creation and really learning how to amplify your efforts through automation, not AI. Joining us as a special guest is Eric. By day, Eric is the one-man band behind Doc's content strategy, leading their journey to an impressive 100,000 organic page views per month. His unique approach to scaling content as a solo act offers invaluable insights for anyone and everyone looking to do more with a whole lot less. So, grab your favorite cup and let's dive into the conversation with Eric. Well, let's start things off with what I think, and potentially arguably is the most important question of probably the whole episode. What's your go-to dish to cook?
Oh yeah. I cook a mean pasta carbonara. So my wife is actually really good at making homemade pasta. We have one of those like stand mixer pasta attachment things, and I finally started helping with that. So I know if I need to make the homemade pasta portion, I can do that. But I also make a mean carbonara. I was on another podcast, and I was asked the same question actually, and the host was Italian. Her name is Fio Dossetto, and I told her I use bacon for my carbonara, which is really controversial because some people are like, it has to be guanciale, and she said I'm okay with bacon as long as it's, you know, good enough, fatty enough bacon. So I got the seal of approval from one Italian person, so I feel like that's all I needed. But yeah, it's like my go-to dish. We always have a big block of Parmesan cheese and a full carton of eggs in the fridge in case we ever need to just whip out some carbonara for dinner.
That's amazing. Does it take you forever if you're doing the pasta from scratch? Because that's what always scares me when I'm doing pasta from scratch. Is like,
the pasta from scratch adds an hour, 2 hours, and so that's normally special occasion, weekends. But midweek, if we just get a little craving, I just use store-bought pasta, and it's 75% is good.
Fair percentage, and also just like, don't tell anyone, just throw it together, and it's still probably absolutely delicious.
yeah, exactly.
So switching gears and talking about being a content team of one, this is something that you really specialize in and have a lot of experience in creating content strategies and building them out yourself. So could you kind of break down what a typical day looks like for you, juggling all the many aspects of content marketing?
Yeah, what a question. I think there is no typical day, and that's the biggest part of being a team of one, is that you're sort of tasked with managing everything that's thrown at you, shifting priorities, shifting needs, etc. But if I had to kind of maybe more percentage of like work I'm doing, for example, so a lot of it is project management, really, and like vendor management. So at Doc, I'm the content lead. I report directly into our CEO. His name's Alex Krakoff. He used to be a marketer himself. So in some ways, I'm kind of lying when I say I'm a team of one, because Alex is I'm our content team, but he's a very competent marketer. So he will run our ad campaigns, and he'll turn on Google Ads and he'll be like, "Oh, I'm running paid ads on LinkedIn now," and I'm like, "Awesome, great!" And I just find out about that over the weekend, and wonderful. But
it's fun.
But it's really great to have a leader who can just make stuff happen. But in terms of my role, like the main channels we're working with are our blog. Like SEO is a really big part of our strategy, and there I'm managing normally something around 8 freelancers at once. And so a lot of sort of a quarter of my time, like in a given month, is writing briefs for those freelancers, doing all the background keyword research, explaining how Doc, our solution, fits into the topic, and then going through the whole back and forth editing process with them. We also have a podcast that our CEO hosts, and so I'm doing all the project management behind that too, like helping schedule the guests. Doing we have an agency that does the edits. I have a solo freelancer who helps with kind of all the moving bits and pieces, like, copy for our YouTube video of the show or TikTok clips and so I'm doing lots of wrangling there as well. And then, then we have our website where I'm working with our designer, where I'm writing the copy, where we're working on messaging, where it's kind of more product marketing work. So that's kind of the basis. That's like kind of the typical, and then our social media feeds. We do lots of product launches at Doc. We have pretty quick product launch velocity where we're doing a new feature release almost every week. So like in January, we just had one big release every single week. So that was also kind of, it's wrong to call it like hamster wheel work, but it's like that ongoing like beat of the work you have to do every week. And then we also try to make time for bigger projects on top of that. And so, I just threw a lot at you. So I guess I'll stop there, but that's kind of the typical work that I'm doing.
Yeah, let's kind of dissect that, because that is so many different projects, and I like how you mentioned they are kind of all happening at the same time, because that is the reality of it. We'd love to be like, all right, this week I'm just going to focus on the podcast content, and next week I'll be freelancer. But I'd love to hear more about how you work with your freelancers and what that process from coming up with, all right, I need to create a piece of content about this, like literally the idea part, to publishing it on your website. So how much information are you giving freelancers? How often are you communicating with them? What does that whole process break down to?
Yeah, so I take a fairly big upfront investment of time in onboarding a freelancer. I think a lot of people don't think of freelancers as like a person you have to actually onboard as if they were an employee. But I find when I look at the ongoing time investment working with a freelancer, if you put a lot of upfront effort into making sure they're up to speed on your product, your value proposition, all the things that you know really well as an in-house marketer that a freelancer does not know, like they're very good at writing. I have no doubt that every freelancer we work with will write well. The question is, can they speak to our audience? Can they naturally pull our product in without me having to, over time, you hope that the relationship with the freelancer gets easier. So I treat it more like an employee onboarding experience where when we first work with a freelancer, I dog food our product a little bit here, and Doc is made for onboarding customers. So you can make like a little hub where you put in checklists and embed dashboards and, throw in content, and it's sort of like a microsite for onboarding a customer. And I use that for onboarding our freelancers. So I'm showing them the product experience at the same time that I'm showing them, here are the blog posts we've written that I like the most. Here are our products that you really need to know and how to tie in. Here's a video demo from our CEO going through each of these products. So, you have to pay the freelancers enough that when they start working with you, they're looking at this and they're like, okay, I will actually invest my time in learning all of this. But it pays off so much because every hour I invest in onboarding someone from the beginning, it feels like it saves me 1 hour on every blog post they write for me in the future, right? Instead of having to give that feedback, okay, great first draft, but we want to be more product forward with Doc. You should tie in this, you should tie in that. They normally know 75% of it once we've gone through that process. So that's maybe something a little different that when I used to freelance as well. I still do sometimes, but typically you just get handed a keyword and 3 sentences and 3 competitor articles and like, go ahead, make content. And so
good luck.
yeah. So like that big onboarding process is something that I kind of over-index on. And then I spend about 2 to 3 hours writing a brief, which is also maybe a little unusual. But again, I find that the time you invest in the brief comes back double, triple in terms of the quality of the content, and then having it just sort of be near publish ready on the first draft. And so what that looks like for me, and what's really different is I say, here's, I've looked at the top articles, here's some that I think are good, here's how I think ours can be different, or here's how our opinion differs on this subject. Everybody else is showing, they're talking about really like pie in the sky things. Let's show a step-by-step list with screenshots of our product and say, here's how to actually do it. That's how this topic can be different. And so, or how our article can be different on this topic. So getting kind of in the weeds on helping the freelancer understand how to stand out here, and then giving them very clear instructions on here's how doc relates to this topic. So it could be a really it could be a very top of funnel keyword where the connection isn't obvious, and you could end up with a very fluffy article that says nothing. But if I say, okay, for example, like I just wrote a brief on the concept of account mapping during sales, where you're basically saying your job is to figure out all the different stakeholders that are in your prospect's account and like draw a little map. And for that, I was like, here's the 5 ways that doc helps with account mapping. That it doesn't say that anywhere on our website, so it's not obvious unless you know the product really well. But here's how we tie it back to that topic. So that's something I also do. And then that tends to, and then the process from there is they read a first draft. I give them high level feedback where I don't really do many line edits. I just say, could we get a better example in the intro? I normally just say example, question mark throughout the whole article. And then they give the draft back. I do a bit of cleaning up, normally spruce up the parts about doc, because that's the hardest for the freelancer to do. And then I actually have another freelancer who uploads it to Webflow, because I just find that was a blocker for me. So it just sort of like goes, I've a lot of the stuff scheduled in Airtable or automated through Airtable, where once I say a blog is ready for publishing, my friend Mike gets an email that says, hey, this blog's ready, go ahead and upload it. And so he just gets pinged every time it's ready, and it just magically appears on our website, and I'm happy.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really fluid process. I mean, there's so many touch points, and this definitely takes a lot of time, but I think it's so valuable to start off the bat with investing time and investing in your freelancer to take the time to get to know your brand. That's something that I just started doing at the end of last year. Is every new freelancer, the first week is literally just onboarding as if they were a new employee. Here's our branding documents. Here's all of our internal docs about all of the products that we have. In taking that time, like you said, it just kind of streamlines their whole content creation process, and they're better able to align the topic with what the brand really has to represent, versus just, the typical brief of, here's our brand tone, here's a couple sentences about our brand style, and it really doesn't tell you much.
Yeah, I explicitly say in our onboarding guide, I can share the link with you, but I have like a public facing version. But
nice.
I say in there, we don't really care that much about style. Like, style is easy to edit. I can breeze through the document with style edits. It's mostly about the substance and how well you tie the topic back to doc, because we're also writing about things that are normally more sort of mid funnel or closer to our product than maybe the typical sort of top of funnel blog article. And so, if it's how to write a sales proposal, the person really needs to know how to write a sales proposal in doc. Like, that's what the article is about. And so there you have to, I'll do a 15-minute Loom video walking them through, here's what it'll look like. And then they just sort of turn that into an article and spruce it up and make it SEO friendly and et cetera. But, theoretically you could do that all yourself. But when you're a team of one doing all the things that we just talked about, there's no world in which I could write 10 blogs a month and 4 podcast episodes and 4 product releases, et cetera. So the job is really vendor management and freelancer management.
Yeah, you really need to be able to delegate and know what parts you should delegate. So when you first started, were you trying to wear all those hats, or did you know right away, okay, this is what I excel at and this is what I want to manage and this is what I can outsource?
Yeah, it's a super good question. And I think that's the hardest part for content leads, especially people who are sort of mid-career, who are you are part individual contributor, but you are part manager, part vendor manager, whatever you want to think of it as. And I think the habit is always, as a creative type, is to take things on yourself. And, I know what quality looks like, so let me just do it myself. And that's very easy to fall into that pattern. And I think my last role, I was content lead at a company called Butter, which was kind of like a Zoom alternative, like meeting platform built for facilitators. And there, I think I was in the habit of trying to do it all myself. And we didn't have as much of a budget. We were a little more like conservative in how we approached content. And there I learned as a one-person team, if I was doing all the writing myself, 4 blog posts a month, that's it kind of thing, right? It plus all the, had to do some product relations and things like that. But I just felt in that role how limited I was by my own capacity and your own ability to just write constantly, or, doing one thing all day is too difficult, kind of no matter what the role is. And so when I got to Doc, and even before I joined and I was interviewing with the CEO, we talked about this philosophy that we're going to build everything we do, we're going to build it to scale. And so there might be, we'll battle test some things first in-house, or specifically with me writing them, or, us editing the podcasts ourselves, the first episode or whatever that was. And then over time, so our general approach has been spin up a channel by ourselves in-house. What does quality look like? So for the blog, I wrote the first 8 blogs, and then I went out and said, okay, what did I need to know to write these blogs? And then make a bit of a guide, and then go out and find a group of freelancers and just iterate on that process until I was happy enough with our monthly output. And then we're like, okay, now let's do podcasts. Let's figure out what that looks like. And so we're sort of iteratively adding channels, we're iterating on our process until we sort of compress down the time it takes to do it. So for the first 3 months, all I was doing was the blog when I joined Doc. And then now it takes me 1 week, a month, maybe, to do the same quantity based on just how well we've got the process down. And so that frees up another 3 weeks. And so now we added the podcast, and that took my whole time for 3 months. And then now that only takes me 1 week a month. And so over time, we're adding channels, and, eventually I'll hit my limit there of not being able to add new things. And then the question is, what should I keep? Like, should I keep this because it's my skill? Blog, for example, I grew up in the content marketing world of SEO blogs, and like many of us have, and blogs will always be in my wheelhouse. I can always do it faster, and I'm probably always going to do it better than an outsourced vendor. But, if we want to add video and, let's say YouTube, I'm not like a native YouTube user. Like I'm an end user, but I'm not a YouTube creator. So that's the kind of thing that I would look to outsource. So you kind of have to find this balance of, where do I really add value, or where am I just adding value with my time versus where do I add value with my skill or my taste or something like that, right? And so we've been pushing over time to, you have to push yourself to outsource. It's not like my first instinct, but it's a necessity when you're a team of one. So it really forces you into that mode of like, how quickly can I get rid of this?
Yeah, but I feel like when it comes to outsourcing, there's really so much pressure sometimes because there's all these content projects that you want to do, and like, launching a podcast, having a bunch of blog posts in the pipeline. Then there's all the social content that you need to do. And there's sales collateral, the list just goes on and on. I personally had the hardest time being like, all right, we're just going to focus on this right now. And it sounds like you got to this stage where you were able to put the time and resources into just really putting energy into one content medium and owning that and making it really successful, then moving on to the next. How do you kind of like, from a mental perspective, how do you process that? Because I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm so overwhelmed all the time with like all the content tasks. So how did you go through that mentally?
Yeah. I mean, I'm also overwhelmed all the time by all the content tasks. I think everybody is. I think that's just, it's hard to multitask in that way. And so the way I try to think about it is more so compartmentalizing down into like a month and thinking, okay, this week, I know how much time, I know what I have to produce every month. I know that the podcast is going to take so much time, the blog so much time, etc. And I don't actually put time slots in my calendar and say this week I'm just going to do the blog and this week the podcast. But I know roughly through enough repetitions and enough months how much time I have to allocate to each thing. And so from a mental perspective, that's the way I deal with it. I actually went through an exercise once where I made a spreadsheet and did, here are all the tasks I have to do and how much time every task takes. And I laid that all out, and it was like 80 hours a week, which is not, and obvious. And so that was a good exercise in saying, you know what, I can't actually do all these things. And my CEO and I sat down and walked through it. That was maybe 3 months into the job when I'd put too much on my plate. And we walked through, and he said, well, you don't need to do that. You can outsource that. You don't need to be the one doing that. You don't need to be the one doing that. And this isn't a priority. You're just because it's something you've been actively working on doesn't mean it should stay a priority. So that was a really useful exercise for me. And since then, I think I've mostly just kind of kept that as a passive mentality as to what I'm able to do. So that's one thing, is just kind of actually mapping your to-do list to your schedule and saying, do I actually have time for all the things I'm going to do? Because otherwise your list is just going to grow and grow forever, and you're never going to get it done. So that's one thing. The other huge thing that I've sort of taken on in the last year is to try to automate as much as possible. I think it's a really underrated skill for most content marketers, because I think a lot of people come from a creative background where they love to write. And so, and I've dabbled with AI, but I'm not really talking about AI here. I'm talking more about process automation. So like in that brief process I talked about before, I have a lot of these things pre-populated in Airtable, like the keywords that the blog post has to touch on, some of my notes about how doc fits in, a link to the ClearScope, which helps talk about like how to optimize the post. Like I have a lot of fields for each blog, and when I drag it over to my make a brief stage, it creates a Google Doc on its own. It populates all these fields, and that all of those little annoying admin tasks that I would have to do over the course of a month when it comes to all these different channels, I'm saving myself like hundreds of hours. Like I'm doubling, tripling my own capacity by getting rid of all this administrative headache stuff that, again, the question of what do you outsource, this is a great thing to outsource. It's manual work that copy pasting or saying new file and putting a link and attaching that over into Airtable. Like that's all work that I don't want to have to do. So my general philosophy around that is figure out what the process looks like manually, doing it all on your own. Make sure you actually want to do all the steps that you're doing, and then attack it with like, okay, what can be automated here? Okay, I'm sending an email to a freelancer every time at this step. Why don't I just make it so that Airtable sends the email to them to say, hey, your blog is published. Thanks. Like, do you mind sharing it on social media? Things like that, right? All these little steps I've automated. And so without that, I would be able to do half as much as I can do. And so, yeah, that's been a really good mindset shift. And or even the other day, we were doing this new project where we're uploading a whole bunch of videos to our website. Basically, we're taking every clip from our podcast and making a video library on our website. And the CEO said, okay, here's how we set it up. All you have to do is drag in this spreadsheet, and then for every video, you have to go and click. And I started doing the mental math. I said, okay, well, we're doing 25, 30 videos a week. That's going to be, that's this many clicks, which takes this many minutes, which takes in my year, that's going to take dozens and dozens of hours. Can we stop before we just agree to this process? Can we stop and figure out, like, is there a way to automate this better? And, we took 1 hour and hammered it out and eventually figured it out. And so now I don't have to do anything. Now I drag some file and everything populates. And so constantly having that mindset of saving yourself time and treating yourself as treating your time as a valuable asset is just invaluable.
Yeah, I love the idea of using Airtable and thinking of automation way more than just AI and actually setting up systems. Like there are so many great YouTube videos on how to set up automations for any tool or any like current workforce. Like there's things in Slack that you can do that sets up Google Drive folders for all of your clients. Like it's amazing how much time you can save that are just, like you said, basic admin tasks when you take the initial time, which setting up automations can definitely take time. But then once they're done, it's so beautiful and so easy.
Yeah, I love the Slack ones. So I've one where every time we publish a blog, it sends to our Slack for the whole company to see. So A, they actually just see the blogs we're publishing, but B, it helps them to see what we're doing, because I think it's easy to think marketing is off writing social media posts or something and just on LinkedIn all day. And so it's nice that every time we hit publish on something, it gets shared. Another fun Slack one I have is when I have a keyword idea, I just type it into Slack with a hashtag, like keyword idea, and then Zapier is looking for that hashtag, and then we'll send it to my list of SEO keywords. It's because I find you always have the best ideas when you're in the worst possible time to have an idea. And
Yes.
just being able to pull something up, and you could accomplish that with a long notes document, but then am I ever going to, or like a pad of paper on my desk, but am I ever actually going to look at my pad of paper again and then put it into my sheet? Like, probably not. So lots of those little like task switchy things I try to, because I have a terrible attention span and forget to do things all the time. So I kind of have to build that into my workflow, right? Like knowing that about myself.
I'm definitely going to have to try that because I legit have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 sticky notes on my desk of things to not forget to do.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
Plus the notepad on the left, plus my project management tool. So,
Sounds right. Yeah.
totally get that. Something that you touched on a little bit earlier, in your previous role, you were really a content team of one and was trying to wear all the hats and delegate everything. Now, you definitely, from what it sounds like, have a great CEO that you're working for that understands marketing and can look at bigger picture. Not everyone's equipped with a great CEO like that, and not everyone's equipped with the opportunity to do outsourcing. So do you have any advice for kind of relaying the importance of this is what we can and handle internally, and if you want us to accomplish these goals, this is how we need to outsource? Like, how do you have that conversation with your higher ups?
Yeah, it's a super good question. I think because I worked, like I said, I worked at Butter before, which is an awesome company, just didn't have a large content budget. So that was just a risk constraint. And I also worked at a bigger company before, but I was a marketing team of one for 3 of the 3.5 years I was there. And then, so it was kind of a common experience. And I think that company before was a really good example of, it was a more kind of classic B2B company with like really big contracts, really long sales cycles. And it was hard to attribute marketing to business. These are accounts that are worked for like a year before they sign. So it's hard to say, this blog post brought them in. And so it was very, it was difficult to attribute. So there was always fighting for like the existence of marketing and the value. Like ironically, all of the business came in through organic traffic, and I was constantly trying to try to wave my hands about that. But so that's going back to your question of managing up. I think for sort of the modern content leader, vendor management is huge, like we talked about, and managing up is the other really important skill of, how do you convey the value of content? How do you push back when you need to push back? Like, how do you make the argument? And so, do I have any good advice for that? I don't know. I think make it a priority is my advice. So like part of what I was saying about making my Slack notifications about stuff being published is just like making space for marketing and making it known what you're doing, making it known with your sales team, making it known with sort of upper management. Like, here are the activities that are happening, even if it's very transactional like that. Like, here's what we did this month. That goes a long way. One thing I started doing at that one company was I was having trouble getting that visibility, was doing a monthly report that was, and this advice came from Jimmy Daly over at Superpath. And he had this report template that was half data, or not even half data, a few data points, just some, like, pick 3 things that leadership might care about, and then have way more narrative in the report. So it comes off as this data-backed report, but then you're saying, here are the 5 big important projects we're working on this month. Here are some roadblocks we faced. Here's what we want to do next month. And just something really easy like that. I just emailed around to the C-suite. Everyone read it, got like a great, keep up the good work. But by doing that for 3-4 months, then they started to see, oh wait, that roadblock was the same roadblock 3 months in a row. And the pains I was having, instead of like bottling it up and trying to bring it up in some meeting, it was just constantly it's like a drip campaign almost to your own leadership of the same themes are brought up every time. And it's way easier to then 3 months later come in and say, I need budget to do so-and-so, that you've already been chipping away at them for months, versus like, I don't know, trying to come up with the most polished argument and amazing data. It's not as effective as just constantly mentioning it. So that report, I think, was really helpful. If you don't have a standing meeting where you get that airspace, and even actually think it was more effective than a meeting because people could just sort of sit on their own and read it.
Totally. In meetings are, you're half tuned in, you're half tuned out. Whereas if you're sending something, you're taking that time. You still may get notifications, but you're taking that time to really, really focus in. Have you noticed from job to job that you've had that the important metrics to track have changed? Or have you noticed any patterns with how you're really measuring the success of your content efforts?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the last 2 content companies I've been at are more like product-led SaaS. So we're much more focused on get users to the website, get them to sign up for a free trial of the product. And then at Butter, it was way more like your typical kind of SaaS like activation thing, where then we're trying to hit them with email drip campaigns and get them to use the product more and then pay for it. Doc is a little more of a sales-led motion after that, where we get them in with a free trial to the product, but then we have a sales team looking at everyone who creates a free account and qualifying them, trying to see if they fit our ideal customer profile, our ICP, and then they're sort of taking over. So at Doc, because that sort of marketing to sales handoff is very clear, the qualified leads is a very easy metric for us to track. So as long as sales and sales pipeline, so like how many opportunities are we creating for sales, and then the rest of it is on sales, right? Sales looks at the lead and says, yep, it checks all the boxes. This is a real opportunity. And from there, that's their job. And so we can track more so those sales metrics like MQLs and pipeline, but then also we have a very direct path from organic traffic to someone signing up for a free trial of Doc. And therefore, stuff like website traffic is super relevant for us to track. And that's kind of the thing I obsess over the most, is our organic traffic. Whereas at the company I was talking about before with the really long sales cycles, so it was a translation and localization company called Summa Lingua. They're much harder to figure out what to report on, because like website traffic is not that exciting when you're talking about like our customers were signing 6-figure deals, but it was taking a year to close them. It's really hard to say what role content plays in those deals. And so there was much more just like sales raises their hand and says, hey, I need a case study on this. Can you get that to me? And then I go to make it and give that to them. It's way more anecdotal and more of a generating the feeling that marketing is supporting the sales initiatives, right? And so, you could measure things there, but, we didn't have the greatest attribution, and that was okay, because we were able to say, okay, sales, you know what? You need a better slide deck. We'll go make you a better slide deck. Like, check. And so that was more of a, does the team feel comfortable selling with the marketing materials they have? And so, yeah, it's kind of the scale of like how sales led are you? How big is your contracts versus how product led? Those more smaller transactions is really going to impact what you're sort of valuing yourself on, where to focus your attention. And yeah, so it has been really, really different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like something regardless of any brand or what you're selling or what you're offering that you can definitely measure is traffic. And with you coming from an SEO content background, I'm sure you could agree that, when you see the traffic numbers, even if that's a year-long, 2-year-long sales cycle, if that traffic is going up, then you're at least getting leads in, which then you can measure as like, okay, here's partial success. Otherwise, it really does come down to sales collateral and sales support, doing more of that like traditional marketing level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see so many people argue that traffic is a vanity metric, but I tend to disagree with that. If you're making content that is actually relevant to your company and it's getting traffic, that is not a vanity metric. That's awesome. That's free impressions on your brand. Not free because it costs money to make them, but it's if you're making the right stuff, then any view is good, even if that's a more or less top of funnel blog that doesn't directly lead to a conversion. It can't hurt to make a positive brand impression.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to like we've talked a lot about different management methods and different types of content to create, but I think we can definitely agree that content burnout is a real thing. So how do you stay excited about creating new content, or even on like a month-to-month basis of like, this is the Rolodex itself, like you have a Rolodex of content you need to create pretty regularly. How do you stay hyped up on it?
Yeah, super good question. And I think that I'm sure it's hard for everybody, but especially as a one-person content team. I said this on another podcast before, and I always laugh that I said it, but it was just for the moment. But I said, the hardest thing about my job is managing myself. And that is my whole job. And the burnout is real. I think one strategy is just to have a mix of things you're working on, and to not be it helps that I have so many channels actually, versus that causing me to burn out. It helps that I get to spend 1/4 of my time on our blog, 1/4 of my time on our podcast, just mixing it up. That's also why I've leaned really heavily into the automation stuff, because it's using a different sort of part of my brain, for lack of a better metaphor, where I'm not just sitting and writing for 8 hours a day. I might be writing for the first 4, and then for the back half of the day, figuring out how do I, automate the thing I was just working on, or how do I pull reports more efficiently, or how do we connect our podcast publishing process to our YouTube channel, to our TikTok account, and orchestrating these fun, like it's making like a Rube Goldberg contraption or whatever. Like that's how I like it. It's nice to mix it up. So that's one thing. Another sort of underrated thing I spend a lot of my time doing is just talking to other marketers. I kind of I am currently the moderator of the Superpath Slack community, which is a community of 18,000 content marketers. And and I don't spend like hours and hours of my day in there, just a few hours. But through that, I've met so many interesting people. I have a one-on-one with somebody, or I go on podcasts like once or twice a week. And it really just sort of keeps you excited about, what are other people up to? And I don't know, it's more of a community feel, because when you are a one-person team, you normally don't have, like, I'm a little bit of an exception right now, having a boss who's also a career marketer. But when you're a one-person marketing team, you normally don't have that peer to either like spar with or commiserate with on, how annoying it is that we have to do X, Y, Z. Like, you're just by yourself. And so it's really nice to have a network of people, even if it's just through LinkedIn or a Slack community, where we can really, I can talk about marketing and talk about ideas. And yeah. And so I think that's kind of how I avoid burnout. I also used to freelance more as like a freelance writer, and I was doing the same thing in my day job as I was doing on the side. And that really was leading to a lot of burnout. And last year, in the back half of the year, I tried to shift more of my freelancing to, I did a little bit of coaching. I helped some companies with feedback messaging for their website. I did some product testing for people where, their product was for content marketers and they wanted feedback. I tried to mix it up so that I was still doing freelancing, but not the same activities. And that just helped me be inspired. I think also content marketing is one of those fields that it evolves. So quickly is maybe not the right word, but it's constantly evolving. And so, the tactic that I was really excited about a year ago, I now look at it and it's completely boilerplate and everybody's doing it. And it causes you to then be in forward thinking creative mode. And I like that part of it. It's tough when you've set up a process that you like and then you're like, oh, darn it, now I don't need to do this anymore because we don't think it's a great tactic. But it's fun to have 3 hours a week in my calendar to just noodle around on something exciting or some other format or whatever, some SEO experiment in Webflow or whatever. So that's how I keep myself interested.
Yeah, it's almost like, a lot of SEOs will subscribe to newsletters and they'll keep track of every single Google update and they'll take the time to read these articles. It's like it's buried into their calendar. But I feel like as content marketers, we forget to do that because we're so buried in the variety of things to do, which yes, that's totally a blessing, but also that's the part where we're definitely buried. So having an outlet to be able to go and talk to other content marketers and see what are people doing now? What automations are they doing? What tools are they using? Tools are a huge one. And having a community to where, like you said, you don't have to check it all the time, but just put an hour or 2 hours on your calendar Friday afternoon before you're heading out or virtually clocking out, go over to that community and just scroll. And even if you don't want to participate, but just to see what messages are going through, I've got a couple groups on LinkedIn that I do this with and just see what's everyone working on, what's everyone excited about. And that kind of helps re-energize me and be like, all right, this is fun again. I'm going to go learn something new and keep the motivation going.
Yeah, absolutely. And even from just a more granular level, day to day, how do I avoid burning out? I try to do the hardest thing first thing in the morning, because by 2 p.m. my writing brain is going to be terrible. So I really try to, whatever you have the most difficulty with, do it first. And so for me, that's normally very careful writing or editing or something like that. And then in the afternoon when I'm burnt out, then I can just do my tinkering in my automations. And rather than not working, I'm building some automation that will help me in the future. So that's kind of just knowing your own sort of mental energy patterns helps.
Definitely. I feel like that's a big thing you've kind of echoed throughout this entire show is really knowing your own strengths and what that looks like in terms of your work day, your work week, what things you're outsourcing, really knowing what you're capable of and excelling at that and not feeling like you need to excel in anything else and kind of learning what that balance looks like. Definitely some great advice throughout. So thank you for that. As we're coming to the end of our chat, I gotta find out, what is your current secret sauce? What's that one strategy, tool, your newest automation? What's your hack that you're just in love with right now?
Okay. Yeah, good question. I've mentioned the word Airtable 100 times, so it's not secret sauce, but I think every content marketer should have the one project management tool that they feel completely native in, that, when someone asks you to work somewhere else, you should be like, no, can we do this in here instead? So that's kind of table stakes for me, though. I'm a big Airtable head. The thing I'm really excited about recently is we've now got we sort of built our own social media scheduling tool within Airtable, where we take our full podcast episode that's been edited and then we chop it up in Descript manually. Someone goes in and takes a few 5-minute clips that could work well in YouTube, that we might have a good SEO heading in YouTube. When we upload those back to Airtable. And then we use Opus, which is an AI powered clipping social media clipping tool. So basically you put in your whole podcast episode and it tries to pick out moments that would make for more viral social clips. And then we put those into Airtable as well. And then we sort of hit, okay, publish, and it publishes those to YouTube. It publishes them to TikTok, to YouTube Shorts. puts them in our LinkedIn sort of scheduling calendar. But then now it also puts them on our website. Once they've been published, it comes back and then puts each of those clips as a page on our website. So it's a sort of Zapier crazy contraption of linking all these tools together. And so now in kind of one click, once we've made all the little videos, it just sort of goes everywhere at once. And I don't know, I'm obsessed with it. It's fun.
That's amazing. And as soon as we're done with this call, I'm definitely going to go right over to Airtable and see what I can play with. You've given me so many great ideas. Thank you so much, Eric, for being on the show. Really appreciate everything that you provided.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super fun.